From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Tuesday the 17th of May. Good afternoon. Today we'll be discussing some of the biggest stories around the world, including the EU being held hostage by Hungary and McDonald's leaving Russia. And we'll also be answering today's big question. Is the governing SPD party really failing in Germany? But first, let's talk about the evacuation of Ukrainian troops from Mariupol. Over the last few weeks of the war, one of the most besieged cities has been Mariupol. The city, located on Ukraine's coast, has a major port, and as such, has been seen as strategically important since the war began. But since the 22nd of April, Russian forces appear to have had the upper hand in the city, and have been able to pin the Ukrainian forces in the city's iron and steel works, where they've been holding up ever since. But it seems today that this holdout might be coming to an end. Ukraine confirmed this morning that hundreds of its soldiers had evacuated from the steelworks, with other reports suggesting that there were hundreds of wounded soldiers also being evacuated via humanitarian corridors. Ukrainian President Zelensky said of the situation that Ukraine needs its heroes alive. Yesterday, the French President Emmanuel Macron finally named his new Prime Minister, Labour Minister Elisabeth Borne, marking only the second time in over 30 years that a woman has gotten the French premiership. And in selecting Borne, Macron has given himself two key advantages when it comes to next month's parliamentary elections. Firstly, polling suggests that voters prefer a female premier. And secondly, the fact that Borne also hails from the centre-left, having served several Socialist Party ministers, is also a major plus for Macron. That's because Macron faces a stiff challenge from the recently formed Left Alliance, headed up by Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And while polling does put Macron on course to win an absolute majority of seats, he's likely hoping that Borne's nomination will allow him to, once again, call himself a president for all. There's more on the way, but be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to make the daily briefing part of your everyday routine. Or you can just search for us in your podcast app to listen along. The Taliban, who have been in control of Afghanistan since August 2021, have today indicated that they'll be scrapping some key institutions established by the former US-backed government. The Taliban are currently facing a budget deficit of around $501 million, and it seems that they're keen to try and cut back on spending to make this work. One way they're trying to do this is by getting rid of the Human Rights Commission, something they claim is unnecessary. In addition, they've also closed the High Council for National Reconciliation, the National Security Council, and the Commission for overseeing the implementation of the Afghan Constitution. There is, though, a possibility that these institutions could be reactivated in the future, at least according to the Taliban government's deputy spokesperson. But it's reasonable to see why some are worried this might be a lot more than just a cost-cutting exercise. Moving to Europe, at the start of the month, the European Commission unveiled an EU-wide proposal to phase out imports of Russian oil to the continent. But nearly 2 weeks later, negotiations over the proposal have stalled. Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Hungary and Slovakia, who are particularly reliant on Russian oil, have all demanded a later deadline for phasing out oil imports. Hungary in particular has been holding up the proposed ban, much to the frustration of other EU member states. In fact, Lithuania's foreign minister said that the bloc was being held hostage by Hungary. In response, Hungary's foreign minister said that preparing for a ban on Russian oil would require the complete modernization of Hungarian energy infrastructure, which he said would cost between 15 and 18 billion euros, which he's asked the EU to cover. So it's easy to see why some are comparing this to a hostage situation. Finally today, McDonald's have announced that they'll be permanently withdrawing from Russia more than 30 years after its first Russian store opened. The fast food company said that owning a business in Russia was no longer tenable or consistent with McDonald's values following the invasion of Ukraine. McDonald's did temporarily close its 850 Russian outlets back in March, amid criticism for responding too slowly to the invasion. But it's now seeking to sell its entire Russian portfolio to a local buyer. The company said that its priority was to continue paying employees until the end of the transaction, and to ensure that they retained employment with the future buyer. The first McDonald's restaurant opened in the country in 1990 in Moscow's Pushkin Square, in what was a symbolic moment, as the Soviet Union began to open up its economy to Western companies. But 32 years later, and it seems the golden arches are coming down. That's all we have time for on YouTube today. But if you want more, including the answer to today's big question, are the governing SPD party really failing in Germany? Then you ought to watch the extended version of the Daily Briefing over on Nebula. Nebula subscribers not only get everything you've already watched ad-free, but also get an extended version of the show every single weekday. Available to watch on Nebula or to stream on your podcast app of choice. So if you want to support the channel and get an even more extensive briefing every day, then you'll want to sign up. And there's good news. Our friends at CuriosityStream, the streaming service with some of the world's best documentaries, is offering a deal whereby you can get both platforms, CuriosityStream and Nebula, for less than $15 a year. That's all the documentaries you could want on CuriosityStream, and then more TLDR on Nebula, including the extended briefing, other full exclusive TLDR videos, and, well, it's always ad-free too. Click the link below to get both services for less than $15 a year and support the channel.